Hello and welcome to Daily Reflection with Aneel Aranha. Today is the 17th of March, 2019. We're going to reflect on Luke chapter 9, 28 to 36. Listen. Now about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent, and in those days told no one any of the things they had seen. The Gospel of the Lord. This is the second time that we have the dramatic attestation of Jesus' identity with the voice of God. The first time, if you recall, happened at Jesus' baptism in the River Jordan. When Jesus had been baptized and was praying, the heaven was opened and the Holy Spirit descended on him in bodily form like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, the beloved, with you I am well pleased." Remember that? Today the voice comes from a cloud and says, "This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him." The basic message is the same, but there are important differences. The message at Jesus' baptism was addressed to Jesus, "You are my son." This one was for the apostles, "This is my son." And the adjective describing Jesus at the baptism was the beloved, again addressed to Jesus, describing the relationship between him and the Father. Here it is the chosen, also describing the relationship between Jesus and the Father, but from the apostles' viewpoint. How is this significant? For me, that's always the important question. The answer lies in the third thing that God says, which in both cases follows from the first 2 statements. To Jesus, he says, "With you I am well pleased," acknowledging and appreciating the beloved's obedience to the will of the Father, fully aware of how it would all end. To the apostles, he says, "Listen to him," essentially telling them that they need to be obedient to Jesus because he was God's Son, the one chosen to save the world. We too are told to listen to Jesus. There is a difference between listening and hearing. Listening means paying attention to what the person is saying with the desire to understand. And if the person one is listening to is Jesus, it also has to be with the desire to obey. Very often when I start preaching, I begin with a prayer saying, "Help us to listen, help us to understand, and help us to obey." All words to that effect. All 3 are important, but it begins with listening. Jesus himself had once advised, "Consider carefully how you listen." Now, returning to the 2 messages, there is one more difference you might be interested in noting. The voice at the baptism came from heaven. Here it comes from the cloud, which enveloped all of them. If you recall, years ago when Moses was up another mountain, a cloud covered that mountain as well. It signifies the glory of the Lord. If you want to be bathed in glory, climb up the mountain of the Lord. Who can ascend the mountain of the Lord? The one who has clean hands and a pure heart. That's the psalmist saying it in 24, 3-4. May you, brothers and sisters, be bathed in glory.